What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online, you're now watching the UK's only alternative late-night talk show, and I'm Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined by my guest, Tony Woodies. Now, Tony served in the Navy as a flight engineer for 22 years. While in service, he had countless life-changing experiences, which he shares, including a near-death experience, a spiritually transformative experience, being in the presence of God, as well as encounters with UFOs. Tony Woodies, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I'm glad to be here.
Tony, it's great to have you on. Now, obviously, just a bit of, we've just done an intro there on yourself, but just a bit of background as well. You are in the process of turning your story into a book, aren't you?
Yes, it's in its infancy, but yes, it has begun, and I still don't even have a name for the book yet, but that will all come to me in time as I write the book.
Well, I was recommended you as a guest to come on the show, and when it comes to near-death experiences, I find them absolutely fascinating, and it sure is an easy way for people to get into the idea that we are more than just our body. Our body is just a vehicle that seems to be carrying our consciousness, but rather than, me get into any details, this is really your chance right now to, have your, explain your story. So let's start off just to begin with. Now, just tell us a bit about your background as well. Was it sort of a religious background, a spiritual background?
Well, I grew up in a small town in East Texas, and in that area, it was predominantly, that's the Bible Belt, they call it, and I grew up in a Southern Baptist, First Baptist religion, it's called, the First Baptist Church of Elkhart, Texas, and of course, that is what it is, and that was my belief system. At 18 years old, I joined the Navy, and literally, right at the very beginning of my career, I was still 18 years old. They put me in the flight station of a 4-engine heavyweight turboprop aircraft called a P-3 Orion and had me shoving power levers and learning how to be a flight engineer at 18 years old on that aircraft. And by the time I was 21 years old, I was the youngest P-3 Orion flight engineer in the Navy and earned my wings. At 24 years old, I'd already by then had probably 3,500, almost 4,000 flight hours of experience. And I was living in Barbers Point, stationed at Naval Air Station Barbers Point in Hawaii on the island of Oahu. Excuse me. And one day we had we were going out for a flight for an ex-military exercise called RIMPAC, Rim of the Pacific. It's still today the largest military exercise in the world, and numerous different countries involved, Australia, Japan, and a bunch of others. And so we were going out for a 12-hour flight, and we had a aircraft with a history of having a problem with number one engine, making what's called CHIPS lights, CHIPS, which means it's either making big parts, it's coming apart catastrophically, or it's a little fuzz of metal that makes a magnetic gap and brings the light on. So you shut it down as a precautionary shutdown. The problem was it was at 10,000 feet right on climb out, and we had max fuel load, max allowable takeoff weights. We were really heavy at the time. And we dump fuel. You can't dump all of it. You can only dump a certain amount. And anyway, we came back and landed to try and make our landing. And we were landing on parallel runways. At 040 was the heading. So we were landing on runway 4 left. And because you have declared an emergency, fire trucks are out there literally right beside the runway. 2 here, 2 more further down, 2 more further down, and stationed there. So as you go by, they literally pull out on the runway behind you and start chasing you in case something goes wrong. Well, problem with that is, here's the situation. We were heavy, 3-engine landing. Give you an idea how heavy we were. We normally land at the end of a long flight, 12, 13-hour mission, you'd usually have about 8,000 pounds of fuel left. We still had 42,000 pounds of fuel. So you've got to go a whole lot faster to stay in the air because you need the extra lift because of the extra weight. And things happen much faster at those speeds. So when the main mounts came down, everything seemed okay. The nose gear came down, and the pilot, it was due to pilot error, used incorrect rudder. He probably put in a rudder correction thinking he was making the correct rudder, and it started swerving the wrong way, so he jammed on it more, and at those speeds, it happens fast, and the next thing you know, you're off the runway. And we're probably doing 150 to 160 miles an hour. So we're cruising, and the fire trucks are sitting there. So we start heading directly at one of the fire trucks, the first 2 set of fire trucks. And we were so close to that fire truck that the right wingtip went over the top of the left corner of the fire truck. The truck is at kind of an angle, so we kind of went over it like that. And I could see the guy on the water cannon on top with the silver fire suit on. I couldn't hear him, but I could see him. I saw his face screaming in terror at the top of his lungs. I never did think to try and find out who that was later. I wish I had done that. And that's when I knew I was dead. There's a difference between thinking you're going to die and you're dead, because there was nothing I could do. I was just along for the ride, and that there was absolutely nothing I could do, and I knew we were going to slam into that fire truck. The number 4 propeller probably missed the truck from the less distance than I am from my computer screen right now. That's how close we came to me not being here. And when that happened, I had this intense terror, and I suddenly had this out-of-body experience while being in my seat, having that experience all at the same time. And as we're crossing the runway at an angle, we're going this asphalt between the 2 runways. It's not designed for a heavyweight, and no planes are supposed to be out there. So you've got debris on the ground, little bits of debris here and there that don't get blown away by airplanes taking off and landing. All of this debris started flying up in the air, and I had the most bizarre. I didn't know if I was dead. I didn't know what was going. It was just real shock to the psyche. I literally became the debris. I have a hard time trying to express or explain that, but I have my perspective from the chair in the plane as that's all going on. I'm outside the plane. I know where the fire trucks are. I can see them all coming to chase us, every one of them taking their own position to head towards us. And we're departing and leaving them pretty fast because they were sitting still at the time. So the distance is growing quickly between us. But every tiny piece of debris, and especially after we went into reverse thrust and threw all this dust up in the air, I was the debris. I was viewing and seeing each individual debris's perspective of where it was in space and time as it's flying around. And I had a 360-degree bubble vision from every one of those tiny little spots of perspective. So my consciousness, my awareness was dramatically expanded in a fashion that I'd never heard about. I'm only 24 years old, I'd never heard of anything like that. And I didn't know what was going on. I thought I was dead. I didn't know if I was dead. I didn't know what to think. I'm just trying to cope with it all. And it was not like it was all chaotic at all. It all felt perfect. I don't even know how to explain that. There was no sense of chaos or disorientation at all during any of that. It was just this total awareness of every tiny piece of debris in its location as they were moving toward each other. It was just bizarre. And we ended up going all the way across the runway to the other side and ended up half on, half off runway 4 right before we came to a stop. And at that point, when the plane lurched to a stop, I suddenly had this expansion of awareness kind of just went all back into me. I don't even know how to describe that. There was no noise. I just kind of did that. But just all of that expanded awareness shrunk back into my personal position. The other odd thing was only outside the plane, as I was the individual pieces of debris, did I have that 360-degree bubble vision ability. I didn't have that in the chair in the engineer seat. The one perspective that I didn't have that at was me in the chair of in the flight engineer seat. So when we finally got stopped and the awareness level came back to normal. I don't know what's normal anymore. I think the only thing I know for sure that's normal these days is the setting on the dryer and the washer. Other than that, of all the things I've experienced since then, I have no idea. But I came off my adrenaline rush, and I felt like I just ran 3 marathons back to back. I was just totally exhausted. I'll never forget that feeling. Just relieved that I'm alive and the engines are running. We're just kind of sitting there. And remember, there's a whole bunch of guys in the back of the plane that don't have windows, okay? They're sitting in what we call the tube section. They don't know anything's wrong. They think it's a normal landing so far. And so I turn my head to the right. Lieutenant Dan Duffy is in the right seat. Lieutenant Mike Lovegren, who the pilot that made the mistake on the landing, is in the left seat. And I look at Duffy and I see him slump, and literally watched him come off his adrenaline rush like I had just done. He turns and looks at me, and I'm wondering if he had the same experience I did, but I never said anything because I didn't even know how to. I'm just trying to come back to reality and figure out if I'm still alive and all that. You know, I was just glad to be here. And he's looking. We lock eyes, right? He starts looking at me, and we're looking at each other right in our eyes. And then I hear this noise over my left shoulder, this whoo, whoo sound. And I see Duffy's eyes looking at me. I see them shift over my shoulder to see what that noise is. And I turn to the left, and that's Lieutenant Lovegren, who's still white knuckling the yoke. Okay. And he's still looking straight ahead. He's still got this deer in the headlight look in his face, and he's trying to say something. He's still on his adrenaline rush, and he's white as a sheet, and he's going, whoo, whoo. I mean, you can see the stress in his face, and he finally says, little military language here, "What the F did I do wrong?" Finally came out. And then shortly after that, all the fire trucks pulled up. And we realized nothing was wrong with the airplane after communicating with them. We literally added power and ended up finishing the landing on a different runway. So I started a landing on one runway in a 4-engine heavyweight airplane while I'm doing a 3-engine emergency landing, and used an entirely different runway to finish the landing with.
Did you
ever want to do that again?
No, absolutely. I mean, this is an incredible story. Obviously, in your official report, what was the cause of that accident in a sense?
Pilot error. It was ultimately attributed to pilot error.
And obviously, you couldn't talk about this particular story, or you never reported it to anyone, did you?
No, not at the time, because I didn't know what happened. I was totally confused about it. I didn't say anything to anybody. It just sounded too crazy, and I knew that. You know, here I was an instructor flight engineer on a 4-engine heavyweight airplane at 24 years old. I knew if I said anything about that, I would never fly again.
No.
I knew that. And the next day, the commanding officer took myself and Lieutenant Lovegren back out to go getting to this is 1980, 1981. He took us back out to go fly. They wouldn't do that today. Now they know a lot more about post-traumatic stress and that kind of thing, and they would do a lot of evaluation on you before they put you back in the saddle, so to speak. But back then, that's how they did business. And so here now, the next day, I've got the commanding officer sitting right next to me on the right side instead of Lieutenant Duffy. And Lieutenant Lovegren, who made the bad landing the day before, is in the seat. So I never considered that it would be an issue. I just didn't think about it because I already had so many thousands of hours of flight time, and okay, we're going flying. And it never crossed my mind that on approach, I might have a problem. And so on the first landing on approach coming in, I'm to see the same runway. I'm seeing the same view I had the very day before, and I start getting this intense terror welling up. I mean, I'm having post-traumatic stress. They didn't have that name for it back then, but that's what was going on. And I knew if I didn't, normally I would sit up high in my seat, and one of the engineer's job is to bend over and grab the power levers during a wave off. If there's a problem, we have to wave off and go around. And I would sit up and just have the 180 degree view outside all the windows. It's the best seat in the house, if you ask me, in a flight engineer chair. And but I couldn't do that day because two reasons. I couldn't look outside because of the stress I was going through, post-traumatic stress. And I didn't want the skipper to know I was having a problem, and I knew if he saw my face, he'd recognize that. So I bent forward and put my hand on the power levers, pretending like I had my head in the game, and that I was going to be ready for a wave off in case we needed to do that. And it took me several landings before I could get through that where I was comfortable again. I had to talk myself, so Tony, in my head, you've done thousands of hours, thousands of landings. That's never happened before. It's probably never going to happen again. You got to get your head back in the game. If we had had a malfunction, I would have not been able to handle it. And so that was the first 2 days. And I know this will sound unrelated, but the third day on Wednesday, so the actual incident happened on Monday, the refly on Tuesday. Now it's Wednesday, and I'm watching television, and I see something on television that I felt was I was seeing my first miracle. And I believed in God at the time. It was a much different belief than I have now about what I think God is. I now have a God of my own understanding because I've spent the last 34 years seeking deeply to try and learn more. But anyway, I'm thinking I'm seeing my first miracle on television, and I'm just still happy to be alive. I'm married. I've got a 2.5-year-old son. And that was one of the things that went through my mind, by the way, when we ran off the runway, was I was never going to see my son again.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, that Wednesday, I went to bed and said a simple prayer, just of genuine gratitude. That's all it was. That I was witnessing my first. I had just seen my first miracle. I now know everything's a miracle. This ink pen's a miracle. All of it. I didn't understand that at 24 years old. So I'm thinking I'm seeing my first miracle, and I'm grateful for it. And it was just a simple prayer of genuine gratitude. And then I added the words in my head. I never even spoke out loud. I didn't get on my knees. I'm just laying on my back in bed, And at the end of that short prayer of gratitude, I said, and Lord, it'd be nice if you could do something like that for me someday. But that's all I said. And you don't expect anything, really. I mean, why would you, right? You say it, but you don't really expect it. And then sometime in the middle of the night, I don't know what time it was. We called it dark 30 in the military, probably 3 or 4 in the morning or whatever. It's the middle of the night. I had what's called I had an out-of-body experience, a near-death experience in the airplane because we almost got killed. And then 2 days later, I had what's called a spiritually transformative experience. I suddenly find myself I didn't go through a tunnel like people talk about when they die. It's just a total change in reality. I'm suddenly in this black void looking at this awesome, beautiful, still affects me today after 34 years, golden white light that's gigantic. It's the gold color of the light that was flicking off and scintillating and going in all directions was made the finest gold you'll ever see. The quality of that color made the finest gold you will ever see here look like a billion-year-old rusted nail. It doesn't even come close to comparison. And it was alive. This being of light was alive and was expressing to me profound, unconditional love like I have never known or ever. I had no idea love could be like that. I had no idea. I had no idea I was that precious. And this is the best analogy I've been able to come up with to date on what the love felt like. We now know the universe is what we can see of it has about 100 billion galaxies. They know it's bigger. We just can't see anymore because the light hasn't had time enough to travel to us so that we can see what's beyond it. Okay, you can't see what the light limitations are as far as the time that it's had to travel because you can't see hasn't reached you yet. So they know it's massively bigger. They think it's infinite. But what we can see is 100 billion galaxies. Each galaxy has between 100 billion to 1 trillion stars. Who knows how many planets, okay? Uncountable planets. Just what we can see, not much less what we don't know is out there. So I believe that life is ubiquitous and the universe is teeming with life. So with that in mind, and that cosmic scale, and you add in this, that the concept of motherhood and the love of a mother for their child is universal. Every mother out there knows exactly what I'm talking about. Most of the fathers do too when they have their children. But for mothers, it's even more profound. The love felt like It was I was so precious to God that I was the last newborn baby ever going to be born at the end of the history of the life of the universe, being loved, held, and cradled by every mother everywhere that ever lived all at once. And keep in mind that analogy stinks. It is nowhere near close enough. It doesn't even become near, it's nowhere near close to the reality that I experienced. And I said 3 words just in sheer dumbfounded awe of what I was experiencing. You can't even think about anything else. It's so overwhelming. This energy coming, there was no sound either. There was what I call divine silence. It was all this energy from God expressing to me what God felt about me. All right, the love, how precious I am. I said, "Oh my goodness," just in oh my goodness. I remember it's like, "Oh my goodness," it's like that, you know. And the instant I said the word goodness, that vibrational energy of goodness on a divine level poured through me. And I suddenly had joy, bliss, ecstasy, peace, harmony, holiness. All of this is a vibrational, energetic experience, real tangible experience coming from God, expressing to me all kinds of things about what God feels about me and thinks about me and what God is, as far as how God can shower the universe with these things. And I wasn't giving any choice. I wasn't asked any questions. There were no words, but I knew instantly I was in the presence of my Creator, and the power that love controls is infinite. It is immense power. And it was equally immensely benevolent too. So I knew that I was precious beyond words, and God would never do anything to harm me or destroy me or anything like that. But I also knew that power, somewhere in the Bible it says that all men will kneel before God. I know exactly what that means, because the humility you acquire the moment you understand you are nothing compared to that. And with half a New York nanosecond of thought, if God didn't want you around anymore, you would cease to exist. That's how much power we're talking about. You would no longer be a thinking being anymore. You would no longer be, period. I don't even know how to express it better than that. But and this is how I know this situation was not a dream, okay? There was this moment during all of this light experience and love experience. And by the way, I tell people God is absolutely insanely in love with you. You just have no idea. Literally insanely in love with you. It's fantastic. And there was this moment where I had this it's instinctual. You have this deep desire to go merge into the light. I call it this urge to merge. And it's powerful. You can't think of anything else. It's all you want. It is your deepest, longest desire of your entire being ever. That is your goal and purpose. That's where we all will go. And I can't wait to get back there. I know I'm here for a purpose. I'm not going to take my own life or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I've got a lot of learning still to do, or I wouldn't be here. But I know where I'm going. I know who I am. And so I'm kind of drawing a blank. The urge to merge. This is how I know it wasn't a dream. When that happened, I simultaneously physically sat up in bed and opened my eyes. And when I did that, at the foot of the bed across the room, that whole wall was gone. And this light is filling my bedroom. I had God in my bedroom. And I'm like, my wife's next to me. I'm not looking at her. I keep my eyes on the light, but I could peripheral vision, I could see her feet. So I knew her back was to me, just how her feet were positioned. And I can't understand why she's not awake. You know, it's how can she not be awake for this? Because there was a billion stars. It was like having a billion stars in my bedroom. And I had enough time to go, this is real. I'm really seeing this in my bedroom. You know, I'm like, this is really happening to me. And then within about 5 or 6 seconds, and then toward of that experience, while I'm awake, physically awake, if you take a big circle, about a 10-foot circle, at the end of the bed where all this wall and ceiling had disappeared or dematerialized or whatever you want to call it, it didn't go away instantly, but it kind of went like that to the center. Everything went from the outer edges to the center and went away. And then it was dark again, except there was this spiritual energy undulating through the wall. And I just sat there and cried, quietly crying the rest of the night as the sun came up. And as the sun gradually came up and it lit the room, that the undulating light in the wall would fade away till I didn't see anything anymore. And my wife wakes up going, "What the hell's wrong with you?" Like, what do you say to that? You know, I mean, how do I explain that?
No, you can't do, can you? I mean, wow. Yeah, I mean, what an experience! What an amazing experience that was. Wow. I mean, that's, you know, so many questions I've got right now. Do you feel that the place that you went to, you had been there before?
Oh, I have to mention that. I forgot to say that. Absolutely. I knew there was this vibrational energy of being home. I was home and I knew it. I had gone home. I knew I was home and I was thrilled to be there. So yeah, I'd been there before. That was home. No home I've ever had here ever felt like that.
No,
Okay.
no. And to try to put it in words and explain it, it's probably unexplainable, untangible, unimaginable. Words, do not do it justice. I'm sure the feeling experience was, OTT as well, over the top.
Beyond that.
Do you feel that the unconditional love that came from the God, as you call it, do you feel that no matter what you had done in this life, and maybe others who get to be in the presence of God, well, first two questions really, do you feel we all go to the same place? There is no hell. And secondly, do you think that no matter what someone has done, there's always that unconditional love?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's kind of like a parent. You may not like your child's behavior, no matter what they do, but you never stop loving them. And there was this nurturing, parental nurturing aspect to it, ergo the motherhood thing I'm talking about. You know, the mistakes we make are just that, they're mistakes. And yes, some of them on our scale, human scale, they appear to be heinous. But I have no idea if there's a hell or not. I didn't experience a life review process. I've met people that have, and their life review process was phenomenal. And the one that struck me the most was an individual telling me about her story where she didn't just have their life review from her own body and her own perspective. She had her consciousness during the life review, every single life event as it occurred. She said everything's there, every thought, every emotion, every split second, everything is recorded somehow and can be recalled instantaneously. And the whole life review was an instantaneous, complete process. And she said her mind was her out of body, the pure conscious state, the mind can comprehend far more and process far more data than you can in the human body. It's like a dumbing down system our human body is compared to what you can experience on the other side. So she processed her whole life in an instant, yet it all felt real time at the same time, every one of these instances. So there is no space time over there. It's a totally different experience in that dimension. Space-time doesn't exist there, and it's hard to explain that because nobody that hasn't experienced it can understand what that feels like. But I do, and others that have been there know. But she said her life experience, she not only lived it from her own perspective, looking out her own eyes, knowing her own thoughts and emotions, had her consciousness this time as she lived it, had her consciousness placed in the minds and bodies of all these people that she impacted in her life. Good, bad, sad, or glad, it's all there. And she knew on a deeply detailed, intimate level exactly the impact of her words, her actions, her non-actions, her decisions, her non-decisions, which are really decisions anyway, had on the rest of mankind around her. And she was shown how that rippled out through the entire future history of mankind. Most people have no idea the power of one life and the impact of one life. So choose your words and your actions carefully for the rest of your life once you hear this, because you have no idea the millions of lives it could affect in the future with a ripple effect through the timeline that you have no control over anymore. But you started. So
well, one of my questions
we're somehow held accountable for that. And so you asked me if there's a hell. I don't know that would be called hell, but depending on one's actions and how they're, I'm sure Hitler had a really difficult life review, you'd think. So if you want to call that hell, I guess you could call that hell, but I did not experience that at all. Or, in that realm, in that environment I was in, nothing negative can exist. It is impossible. The nature of the dimension that I was in flat out will not allow it. I don't know how that is, but I know this, it cannot happen.
Okay, and do you feel that, what I was going to ask there as well, before I just move on with that question, is your experience that you've had. There's so much that you're bringing into the moment now, as you said, because you experienced how one life can have such a dramatic effect on the future, not just the present moment. You've got all these great things that you've brought into the now, because your experience really is in a sense, I suppose, how can we improve the way that we live in the present moment now? How can we better ourselves with the information that you can bring over to us from the experience that you had? Obviously, it was for your own self as well, but look how it benefits others. Do you feel that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's part of why I'm so open about my experience, because I think this is very important that the rest of the world knows about this idea, this concept, this experience, whatever you want to call it. And do a little reflecting on, how they're conducting their life, and what we should, all of that. I went out and had tried to learn everything. The following Sunday, after my experience in the light, the first thing I did at 24 years old is I went to the church at the Waianae Baptist Church on the western end of the island where we were going to church. And they had a guest pastor that week, and I went to him asking him, explain to him what happened to me. And it was a couple of years before I could tell this story without just crying. Just couldn't stop crying about it. And I now understand I was grieving the loss of the greatest love I'll ever know. I didn't understand that at the time. But so I went to this pastor and told him what happened to me. I was able to express it and get it out, even though I was crying. Because remember, I was trained to deal with extreme emergencies and get my focus back, so I can do that. But it was very difficult at the time. And he just looked at me, kind of tilted his head and turned his back on me and walked off and didn't say a word and just left me standing there. And I was dumbfounded because I was at a very vulnerable moment and I was looking for help. I needed to know what happened to me. And so after I left the church, I got angry and took offense. And I wish I hadn't done that, because I went and lived my life my own way, walked away from God, the church, everything. I took it as I was an immature 24-year-old kid. You think you're an adult, but you're not really, maturity-wise. You may be doing adult things, but you're not mature yet enough to understand. You don't have enough wisdom yet either. So that led me down a path I wish I hadn't done. But I needed that to grow through, I guess. And Yeah, it's just, so after that, I started seeking much more in depth and started learning about a God of my own understanding instead of what somebody else was telling me. And I studied numerous different religions, starting with Christianity. And I'm not here to offend anybody, okay? That's not my purpose. But I did look at a lot of different, and learned about their history and how they came about and things of that nature. And I learned a lot. Then I studied everything I could about the nature of the universe and learned everything about the universe that I could find, starting at the very smallest, from quantum entanglement and subatomic particles and quantum energy, all the way, and quantum physics and quantum electrodynamics, all the way up to and including everything in between, up to and including supermassive black holes and the mathematics and all of that. I mean, I went deep, okay? And all of that I learned was fun and great to learn, but it didn't really answer my question. And the real question the real answer I came to understand was I didn't need to do all of that. All I needed to do was go be love. That was it. It's really that simple. We're here for this simple reason, to learn how to love one another just like God was showing me, unconditionally on a profound level. Okay? Love one another unconditionally, help each other, take care of this planet, and love God with all our heart. It's that simple. That's the purpose of life.
So
You go do that, you will have a profoundly happy experience in life, and it will be success.
But why are we so addicted to pain? Why are we so addicted to doing it the hard way? Why are we not looking at things from a different perspective?
Well, that's an interesting question. But one of the things that I've learned is through the I Am Discourse books, especially. I think it's in the second book. The book it's called The Magic Presence. It discusses that, talking about pain. When we think positive thoughts, loving thoughts, it creates this energy through us. And I don't know if you've ever felt it, but I've felt this flash of energy go through me where I just feel exhilarated and feel really good inside. And there's no pain. You know, I feel great. But when I'm not thinking those things, and if I'm angry, I'm resentful, the whole universe is energy, right? So my body is energy. So if my consciousness controls that energy. So if I'm putting negative thoughts, I'm putting negative energy through my body, and that's creating pain, right? It's going to manifest as pain. So in my opinion, my belief system now is, and my experience is, that pain is a measuring stick or a form or a way to teach us how to think correctly in a loving manner, to create the positive, energetic, uplifting experience that those kind of thoughts and expressions create. And we are co-creators with God all the time. So are we going to create what God is, the love and the expression of exuberance and exhilarating experiences, or not? And if we don't, that's the nature of the universe and consciousness. As I'm going to create the pain. Am I going to create the pain, or am I going to create the joy, the bliss, and the love? It literally works that way. It's not. That's what I've come to understand. And the I Am Discourses are what I kind of knew that, but the I Am Discourses solidified that for me when I read it the way it was written in that book.
Reminded you.
Exactly. You know, God in the Bible says, "I am that I am," right? Well, I think now I understand, after everything I learned, that everything is God. Everything. We are all individual expressions of God, assisting God in the expansion of the God consciousness and God mind, and the one great mind. That's what I believe now.
So there's nothing that God is not.
Exactly. If God is omniscient, omnipresent, and all powerful and all seeing, then everything is a form of God consciousness. It's all about the nature of consciousness. Okay? And consciousness has a profound impact on our world. You were just saying it earlier before we came online. You're talking about you were seeking certain things and looking for answers, and you kind of put it out the universe, and next thing you know, here it comes to you. And it happened in a way you had no idea would ever come from. Right? So
Yeah.
it's about training our minds to work on the unconditional love scale and create more of it. We are here to create unconditional love. And these books called the I Am Discourses, printed by the St. Germain Press, I think they're in Ohio, if I remember right, or Illinois, I can't remember which now. St. Germain is the being that manifested to them to guide them here. And I now believe that anything is possible. After what I experienced, there are no limitations. So, I believe that Christ was an ascended master. So was Buddha. So were many others. And that's what our ultimate purpose and goal is. We will all be one day ascended masters. Okay? Everybody thinks about the spiritual world. Well, guess what? You're living in one right now. There are many mansions in heaven, right? You're in one of them. So it's a matter of what I've become to learn is that consciousness affects our mansion that we live in, and the amount of love that we create has a direct impact on the quality of our life and the direction it goes. And so that's been my goal, is to try and learn more about that. I'm really excited about the I Am Discourse process. I'm just beginning. I've only read like the first book and about halfway through the second one, but there's 20 of them. And these books are basically instruction manuals on how to do this. And so the real exciting part is it isn't for me. It's for everybody else that I get to go share this with and experience these things with and have fun with. And I bring humility to it all, because I know none of this that's happening has anything to do with me. I don't have anything to do with it. It's all God doing these things. I give credit completely where it belongs, is in God's hands, because I am nothing without God. It literally. And anything I have, own, create is because of God. So, and the more I love God, the more gifts I'm given. And I don't mean that in a material sense at all. There are people with gifts that can channel others, or they can talk to people on the other side. I've seen these things happen in a way that was absolutely undeniable that it was real over my years since I've been seeking so hard. So all of this paranormal stuff is real. If you go to a website called Experiencer, because we don't like to call ourselves near death, we have had a near death experience, right? So we are experiencers. So if you go to Experiencer without the S, experiencer.co, no M on the end, experiencer.co, that is a website where Dr. Rudy Shield, who was ran the astrophysics lab at the Harvard Smithsonian in Cambridge, and Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo 14 astronaut, came up with the quantum holographic theory that includes all these paranormal events and the possibility that they're real. So the universe is far more than just a materialistic Newtonian aspect that most scientists believe.
Absolutely.
And these guys came up with a way to prove it.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much to your story here. We've barely scratched the surface as well. When you were in this other dimension, this spiritual dimension, this other one, this higher level, let's call it that, home for others.
Oh. Yes, it was.
Did you feel there were other levels to go to? Were you aware that that there may be other levels to attain to? This wasn't the only level to go to. This was just where you were.
Exactly. And I know that because I had this urge to merge, and I knew there was more. There was much more. But I didn't get a chance to go find out. And I know I will one day when I'm done with this life experience here. But yes, I believe there's an infinite number of dimensions. Really.
Well, that's what I get told. I channel, and I'm just in the process of writing my first book. And what's come through is that there's the infinitive number of levels to go to. And a lot that you've said there sort of resonates with myself.
Isn't that
Yes,
exciting?
it
It's going to be a great ride forever. How much fun is that?
it
I mean, think about it.
it is, and my channeling also told me as well that even where they're at right now, they're still trying to work it out. Of where they may go on these higher levels. It's a
Yep.
kind of a bit like this in a sense. Definitely more vibrant and more real, I would say. Were you aware
Oh,
when
there's
you?
more real there, way more real than this place. This place is black and white TV compared to the best high def you'll ever see. Big difference. Big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And were you aware of other beings there when you had this experience? Was there? Could you see any separation with anyone else that was potentially there in the background?
No, I didn't have any other experience but me and God. It was that deeply personal and individual. Um, I suspect had I gone into the light and merged, that would be different, and there would have been more on the other side like that. But I wasn't allowed to complete that process. Um, but at the same time, I think God knows me. I know God knows me, uh, and knew that I'm an engineer, right? I have the mind of an engineer, so I need proof. That's how I work. Until I'm dogged. I never give up until I find something that I believe is truth, and I will pick it apart until I figure it out, until I get satisfied that I'm actually looking at something that's true. So God knew that about me. That's why God did the bedroom part, because He knew that if I just woke up from a sleep and that didn't happen, I would think it was just a dream, and I would never be talking about this anymore.
Absolutely, absolutely. And do you feel that when you was having this experience that your life would be of a richer quality from that day onwards? That you would never you understood that potentially you could have anything in life that you so desired to wish to manifest as well, in a sense.
Actually, not at the time. Like I said, I was just 24 years old, and I didn't have anywhere near the wisdom level or knowledge, or had all this seeking and learning and understanding under my belt. I can do that now in retrospect and say, yes, I agree with that statement. But not at the time. I just wasn't. I wasn't ready to even come close to that kind of a deduction or a realization. Now I realize it, but it's taken me 34 years.
Absolutely, but there's no finishing line with this stuff.
And you know what? God has infinite patience too, right? So God has the ability to wait infinitely until I wake up and quit acting like a child and start growing. And feel like really only in the past year or two that I've had this quantum leap in growth and realization and understanding and beliefs, expansion of my awareness in that way. But
So for
it came
example,
with a lot of
sure.
humility, though. I have to tell you that, because I had to give up on some old ideas. And that's never an easy thing to do, is to give up your paradigm of thinking. Mankind doesn't like change much, but guess what? That's what the nature of God and the nature of the universe is, constant change. So get used to it.
Do you think those who are lacking in the sense of ever looking beyond just science, in a sense that there's science is all there is and anything else is just woo woo? Do you think they're lacking in having a more fulfilling life, in a sense? Yet they may say they're very happy and fulfilled because of science, but do you think they are lacking some deeper part of them that they're not connected with, that could improve them in ways they don't understand? Do you think, or is that a bit far fetched?
No, actually, it isn't. I believe that I feel sorry for them personally, because, I mean, Dr. Eben Alexander, who a neurosurgeon, who had his near-death experience, pretty summed it up pretty well. That he didn't believe in. He thought consciousness only existed within the brain and that kind of thing. And as a neurosurgeon, who would know better, right? Well, he found out otherwise, and so he has a much far richer experience of life now, because he's expanded his belief system and is reaching out into other areas. He started his own group and website called Eternia, Eternia, NAVAEA.org, I think it is, to study all this. He quit being a neurosurgeon to go into this direction with this paranormal stuff. So is that a richer life? I would think he would agree.
Yeah, and he's still.
It's any less satisfying being a neurosurgeon. I'm sure it was saving lives and all that, but I think now he understands. Yes, he had to do the work, but he had a lot of help from above, helping him help these people. And so he's like me. I quit. You got to drop the ego. You let the ego go and start realizing where the real truth and power is coming from, and then I am just a conduit, and I'm just here as an instrument of God, doing God's work the best I know how and the best I can, and asking for guidance in that all the time. And so that's who I've become. There was a time in my life where, especially when I was a young flight engineer, I thought I was just be all end all, God's gift to the world, flight engineer. I'm it, a lot of bravado and all that. And no, that's not how it works.
Well, you had a lot of balls, shall I say, to do the job you did, because you don't think about it, I suppose, at the time, but there's a lot of things that could go wrong, and you're up a long way up there.
And it did go wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't the only incident I've had. I don't know if you've ever heard the definition of aviation, but an aviator will tell you this. It's hours and hours and hours and hours of boredom interspersed with moments of stark freaking terror. And that's literally how it works. I mean, to give you an example, I'm flying a mission 500 miles north of the Arctic Circle, tracking a submarine at 200 feet off the water. We had outboard engines shut down to save fuel. Right? It's hurricane force winds. It's dark because it's in January and the sun never comes up there anyway. We've got 100-foot swells literally getting salt spray on the windshield of the airplane, and number 3 turbine blows up. And I get a fire warning. So I'm single engine, single generator with a fire. Less than 100 feet to go before I smack a wave top. That's not the time to screw up. Okay, those are the kind of emergencies I was trained to deal with.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Just to give a perspective of where you come, your background as well. Yeah, I mean that's interesting to know that. Well, okay, now obviously we're getting to near the end here, which I hate, because obviously we've barely scratched the surface in one sense, and I've got to get you back on when you've got your book or ready for publish. But was there any other near-death experiences, or was there another experience that was a bit more paranormal in the sense of UFO?
I've had a couple, but here's the one that stands out the most. This happened twice. Once when I was an adult, but it was a little different. Both happened because of dangerous situations involved with snakes. But I grew up in East Texas, and there are a lot of poisonous snakes down there, especially the pit vipers. And one of them is called a water moccasin or a cottonmouth. These are big snakes. They weigh about 25 to 35 pounds. They can literally be as big around as the thigh on a full-grown man. And I was about 8 or 9 years old, maybe 10. I'm poking around in the water's edge. We had these 2 water tanks, ponds on our property, poking at tadpoles with a stick, just playing around. And I instantly saw in my mind's eye this big snake right behind me, coiled up, ready to strike. And so rather than panic, I kind of slowly leaned forward and put my hand in the mud in the water and looked back over my shoulder, and there he was, right at eye level, looking right at me. And he started to, and as soon as his mouth cracked open, I knew he was going to strike. And I took off across the water. It was at the shallow end of the pond, and he barely missed me. But had that not happened, how did I know that? I clearly saw that snake in my mind's eye, and something was protecting me. Okay? And I say this jokingly because I don't remember getting my feet wet, but I don't think Jesus Christ had anything on me when I crossed the shallow end of that pond, because I was out of there. And I never forgot that, but I never understood how it could be. And as a kid, you just kind of let it go. Okay, I'm going to go play the rest of the day. And you don't think about the depth of the consequences of what that could have been.
Of course.
But it never left my mind. So that was my first paranormal experience, and I had my first realization about what death really means when I was 6 years old and my mother died in a car wreck. And we had 6 kids at home. So I'm happy now to know that she's going to be waiting for me. After all these things I've had experienced and learned, I know death is just a transition. And I never got to experience my mother in that way growing up. And I don't know why that is, but one of these days I'm going to be back with her, and we'll create a relationship then. So that much I do know.
just tell us as well, because I understand that you had a UFO experience, you had a couple of UFO experiences, but just just discuss the one that sort of sticks out, and also why do you think you had the experience as well?
I don't know why. I couldn't tell you why, but the experience happened in so the near-death aircraft experience happened in May or June, I think it was, of 1981. The first UFO experience happened in August of 1980, and I was on my way to Sigonella, Sicily, to start a 6-month deployment. And we were stopping in the Azores overnight to for a fuel stop and to get crew rest and finish the rest of the leg the next day. And we had an airplane that had a hydraulic problem, and being the engineer, you're always the last one to leave the plane. So everybody else went up to the barracks to get checked in and go get something to eat. And it's already dark, right? And so another kid named Tommy and I stayed behind to fix the plane. And so we're the stragglers heading up to the base club to get something to eat after we got cleaned up at the and checked into the barracks and got a shower and all that. And so as we're walking up over the hill past the air traffic control tower, which was one on the high spot on the island in that area so they could see the runway better, I noticed a light out over the water about 1.5 miles out. And it wasn't the right color and it wasn't moving. So okay, that's not an airplane, right? This is probably like 10 o'clock at night, 9:30 or 10. And I grabbed Tommy's arm. I said, "Hey, Tommy, what is that?" And he stopped and he looks, he goes, "I don't know." And about the time he said, "I don't know," this thing was orangish reddish color, right? In the beginning. And then it brightened up into a really bright plasma ball, basically, a real bright white ball. And was so fast when it left, it went from in front of us to our left. We couldn't even track it with our head or eyes. By the time we turned our head to see where it went, we could tell the direction it went. By the time we turned our head to look, it had gone as far out to sea as you could without being over the horizon, sitting on the edge, stopped. It had already stopped, okay? I'm like, okay, that's not a airplane. You know, a few Navy language expletives come out between Tommy and I. We're all excited about it. And so we're watching this thing for about another minute or two. It brightens up again, and it dimmed back down when it stopped. So now it brightens up again, and it comes right at us so fast we can't even follow it. It's already past us before we can turn our head to look back. And now it's 1,500 feet, about 200 feet past us over our head. I know the people in the air traffic control tower saw it. There's no way they didn't see it. More than likely, they were tracking this thing on radar, okay? And then it dimmed back down. Now it's close enough. I tell you what, if you were looking at a 737 aircraft at 1,500 feet over your head on a clear day, you clearly know what you're looking at, okay? And this was a clear summer night, no moon, Milky Way was splashed across the universe, and just you see crystal clarity that day. So then the next time it brightened up, it went back to its original position. So it's making this, and it did this for about 10 or 12 minutes, making this long isosceles triangle shape in the sky. The last time it stopped was right over us again near the air traffic control tower, and it jinked up at an angle about like that, brightened up into a plasma ball, and shot off into the Milky Way within 5 or 6 seconds at the most. I lost it in the deepest twinkle of the stars. And back then I had 2010 vision, meaning what a person at 1,000 feet could see with 2020 vision, I could see just as clearly at 2,000 feet. So I lost this thing in the stars within 5 or 6 seconds. And
Incredible.
that was August of 1980. We didn't have home computers. We didn't have cell phones.
No.
We didn't have any of that technology, okay? So this was far beyond any technology I'd ever heard of. They're here. They are here.
Well, it's incredible that you've had these experiences. It's almost like it's putting a bigger picture together for you that you've been looking for, and you've been because you've been seeking. You know, there's been little bits here and there sprinkled across different times, and it's helping.
Give you an example of that. We're now looking into. That's what the experiencer.co website is about. Is they're trying to find the link between people who are having UFO experiences and spiritual experiences, and the connection between that, and there's a bigger connection going on there that we don't understand yet.
Well, that's really strange because I've left my body before. I had an out of body experience, which I don't talk about really too much, but I also had a very strange UFO experience with my family, and we don't talk about that because it's beyond our. It's something that we just can't rationally, all of us when we're together, comprehend what happened that day.
Right. You have missing time and things like that.
All of that.
Oh, yeah.
And I got a past life regression to go back to that point, and the regression was very different to what I remember it being.
Usually is.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And so I what I'm saying is, I can connect with you on that level with what you just said there. That makes complete sense. There's something. I mean, the UFO experience happened first, then there was an out of body experience, but these were years and years apart. But I mean, whether that's correlated to what you're saying. But it is interesting that, as you've just said, people who have had near-death experiences, which mine wasn't, but who have had that, there is that connection as well with the
Yes.
UFOs, yeah. So
I think it may have something
thanks
to
for
do with
sharing.
our opening up of our consciousness and awareness level. It's becoming greater, and so we are able to see more. There are instances where, and you've got to get Ray Hernandez on. I told you about him. There are instances where, and he was part of this, he had this situation, if I remember right, where a whole group of people saw a bunch of UFOs and a whole other group of people standing right there with them couldn't see a thing. What's up with that?
That's
it's
incredible.
mind-boggling.
That is mind-boggling. And who knows, maybe they're not from other galaxies, for example. Maybe they're interdimensional,
I agree with that, or both.
Or both, yeah, or both. There's such a mixture, probably. Fascinating. Now, just before we finish this interview, going back to some of the near-death experiences that you've had, what would you say, and this is a difficult one, I mean, yeah, what would you say is the most important message from what you've experienced?
Love each other unconditionally, no matter what. That is by far the most important thing. I know that sounds simplistic and cliche, but it really is the truth because of the power and the spiritual energy connected with it. That is where the importance comes in, and what it allows our awareness level and our growth to become, and what we turn into. Let your light shine. That's it. Just let your light shine. And make it brighter and brighter and brighter every day with more and more love. That's the single best piece of advice I could ever give to anybody. I don't succeed at that every day. I'm human. I have my failures and frailties too, but that's what I try to do. And I'm doing a much better job at it than I used to.
Well, Tony Woody, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I hope to come back someday, especially after the book's done.
Most definitely. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests by themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.